Alright guys, Quantum back here again with the final installment of our top 5 weapon series for Dark Souls 3 PvP. And the number 1 slot, it really surprised me, just like number 2 surprised me, but you can't argue with results like I said. The weapon that I think is number 1 in the game was one of the worst kinds of weapons in Dark Souls 2. Never would have used these things. They were really just not practical. However, in this game, given the mechanics of Dark Souls 3, the way things work, these weapons seem to always produce the most consistent results, and at the very worst, I mean, even if you're fighting somebody who's obviously, a lot more skilled than the general people who play PvP, you can force out trades with them and come out on top, and I'll explain that once we get to the PvP. But the weapon that I'm talking about, and I was really surprised about it, like I said, is just a standard ultra greatsword, right? Whether it be the Lorien greatsword, the Lothric Knight greatsword. In my opinion, it is the Lothric Knight greatsword since it does the most damage, 663 at 40 faith and 40 dexterity and 40 strength. It deals lightning damage. You could also upgrade. I think the Cathedral Knight sword is a base physical, does a little bit less damage, but the Lothric Knight greatsword, I mean, so overpowered. It is ridiculous. And let's outline some of the reasons why it's actually so good. So, starting off, I mean, the weapon is obviously quite big. It is an ultra great sword, right? But what makes this weapon really unique is that when you two-hand it, and the same goes for great axes and great hammers, when you two-hand any of these kinds of weapons, and ultra great swords, of course, they can't be parried. The R1 cannot be parried. The R2 cannot be parried. The running R1 can be, so can the rolling R1. Now, with that said, right, you can really put pressure on your opponent and play both offensively, reactively, and defensively with these weapons, right? Like I said earlier, if you're playing against somebody who's a little bit more skilled, they're dodging all your attacks as they approach you, maybe you throw out the R1, they're rolling through it, they're just constantly being patient and playing reactive to you. You can kind of approach them and not attack, obviously, right? Just play that bit of a psychological game and bait out the trade, because again, with heavy weapons you have hyper armor. And something I did notice was when I was wearing lighter armor, because if you've looked at my ring setup, I've switched over to the Halo ring +2 so I can actually equip heavier armor. And when I was wearing lighter armor, I actually noticed myself getting knocked out of some of my attacks sometimes, because I was wearing lighter armor when I wasn't using the Halo ring. And also we respect our character and gave him, I think, 5 extra points of vitality instead of putting those points into faith, because obviously the body buffs, as was tested, don't actually work the same way they do in PvP, and we'll discuss that in another video. But with that said, some of this heavier armor, I find my attacks going through, or like I said, maybe more hyper armor frames are added to your attack. At least that's what it feels like. Now, with that said, I tested it with just the normal R1 and with the stomp. What happened was, I played with lighter armor, and somebody used the Exile Curve Sword against me, and they were actually able to get through my stomp and knock me out of my stomp animation by doing their special attack. I equipped heavier armor and tried it again, and they didn't knock me out of my stomp attack. And I'll mention that because I have that PvP match recorded when we get to it. So it's quite unique to see if heavy armor does indeed make a difference for poise on your hyper armor frames. But we'll discuss that in a little bit. So with that said, you can't parry the R1 or the R2. So it makes it a very safe thing relatively to throw out, right? You throw out this R1, if an enemy dodges it, they have to worry about, are you going to follow up with a second R1? And if you have a lot of stamina like I do, you can follow up with 4 R1s. Not that you really necessarily want to do that. You probably want to throw out 3 max, because you always want to keep some stamina. So you have a lot of space to dictate around you and kind of keep your opponent honest, right? When you fight people with Goddard Twin Swords, for example, and we go up against this, when they do the rolling L1 thrust, right? You can dictate this the space in front of you. So if they're trying to roll, and then they end up throwing out the L1, you're gonna hit them out of it. Well, or even if they connect on you with it and they do some damage to you, you're still gonna stagger them with your R1. And just like with the Dragon Slayer Sword Spear, when you stagger somebody with the R1, since your attack comes out and they're gonna be staggered because lighter weapons don't have hyper armor, you're going to be able to follow up with a second attack and deal some serious damage, right? When this weapon hits you, it's going to be dealing around 700 points worth of damage because we do buff it. Only use the lightning pine resin. As you can see, we go from 663 to 758. We don't need any other buffs. And in general, I think most of the time you'll actually only end up noticing a difference of about maybe 30 points of damage is what I've noticed from testing. So you're actually going to connect with an additional 30 points of damage to your opponent when your attack minuses their defense, usually. I mean, give or take, enemies' armor, but it's still useful and still effective. Now, on trades, right, you're obviously going to come out on top. If you're fighting up against other Ultra Greatsword weapons, your weapon likely does the most damage if you're using the Refined Lothar Greatsword at 40 Strength and 40 Dex. So, with that said, if you both end up hyper armoring through each other's attacks and following up, you're likely going to come out on top on that exchange. So, no matter if you fight heavy weapons, medium weapons like spears and the Dragon Slayer Sword Spear and other things like that, or even light weapons like the S-Stock katanas and Goddard Twin Swords or other straight swords, you will likely come out on top. Because once again, just like the Dragon Slayer Sword Spear, this weapon is just like a beefier version of that. You're able to dictate the pace of the match, dictate the space in front of you, condition your opponent, play that psychological game. Are you going to throw out an R1? Are you going to throw out the delayed R2 thrust, right? When you're rolling, you do have to be a little bit careful about being parried, but when you're rolling, you can catch people's rolls with the thrust. So all the same kind of things you can do with the Dragon Slayer Sword Spear that made it really top tier. It's just that the Ultra Great Sword has a little bit more range, obviously a lot more damage, and it has those unparryable attacks, which make it that much better, and why I personally think it's the best weapon for PvP. And like I said, it is the most consistent. When I did the recordings for these matches, we played 15 and we lost one. We lost one match to a Hollow Slayer Greatsword, and it was a really close match, and I just messed up at the end, and he ended up clipping me for the final piece of damage. Now, with that said, I've noticed that when you use this weapon, it's usually 2 or 3 hits to kind of get the opponent down to the last sliver of health. They might die on the third hit, but you don't really want to be trying to fishing out a 4th hit when they only have like 10% of their health left or 5% of their health left. It's kind of hard because obviously opponents are going to be playing a lot more defensive. They're going to be dodging and not taking risks. So what you need to do is have a weapon in your offhand, like a straight sword or something like that, or a katana people like to use for the running thrust to finish off opponents. But the problem with those is that they can be parried. So let's continue on with this whole unparryable, theme. And what I've noticed is the whip, and you'll see this in PvP, is an amazing tool to finish off opponents with. Amazing, absolutely amazing. Just the standard sharp whip plus 10. And it weighs 2, so it weighs very little, and it can be very, very effective. So what I do in actually a lot of the PvP matches is enemies like to take risks at the beginning. They have full health, they want to see how the pace of the match is going, and all it takes is one combo from you. 2 hits from an R2, the enemy's probably taking between 800 and 1100 damage, just from 2 hits, right? So if they're coming in taking a risk, they're taking huge amounts of damage. So if they have no health left and you don't really want to try to run and chase them down with a slow Ultra Greatsword or a relatively slow Ultra Greatsword, it actually is quite fast for a weapon of its size compared to Dark Souls 2, but all you need to do is two-hand this whip, and the special attack from the whip actually has an amazing amount of range. Enemies don't really know how to dodge it because the startup of this L2 attack, if the enemy's directly in front of you, they're going to get hit by the startup of it, and you're going to combo them for like 3 hits. If they're far away, they have to roll as soon as the whip animation starts whipping out to the long range in order to dodge it. A lot of enemies will mistime the roll and get hit by it, and it's an easy way to finish people off. Plus, the whip does decent damage at 308. So it's really effective, not to mention it goes through shields. This special attack, it goes through shields. So if enemies are blocking, like I think one of the first matches I played, a guy was using the Havel Great Shield, and we did the special attack with the whip. As you can see here, skill impact, evade shields, and deal a stinging blow that temporarily slows stamina recovery. So it is extremely effective, even though we don't even use the ability to slow the stamina recovery, which is also really good. But there's just the fact that it's really long reaching, it's fast, it's able to evade shields. It's a great way to finish off opponents. And, of course, it's unparryable. They can't parry it. So it is extremely, extremely effective. Now, with that said, we're just using, the simple fist weapons, whether we need HP or FP to recover. And our ring setup is pretty static. There ain't going to be no ring swapping or very much ring swapping going on. Maybe when we get hit, we switch out the life ring to the Sun Princess ring or the blue tier stone ring, something like that. Ring of Steel Protection, you guys were right. It doesn't really do that much. Same with the Lloyd Shield ring. And we don't really need the Lloyd Sword Ring in this build because we do a lot of damage as it is. And we're likely going to be taking a trade when we do our first hit. So we're likely not going to be at full health when we end up connecting through on the trade. So we don't really need the Lloyd's sword ring on this build. So with that said, I mean, that is the build, guys. With the Havel ring, which is actually an amazing ring to use for PvP, we can equip some heavy armor like I discussed earlier. So again, we can go a little bit of fashionista with this. I like the Dragon Scale armor paired with the Lorien helm or the Alva helm. And the Outrider Knight gauntlets, I think, is one of the best hand pieces in the game. And surprisingly enough, the Nameless Knight leggings for weight to defense is actually quite good, I think. So check that piece out and compare it to the other heavy leggings that you use and let me know what you guys think. So I've switched over to using that, but of course we can always switch over to the black leggings if we need more elemental defense, or jailer trousers. But again, the way that the defense works in this game kind of makes armor not too relevant. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still important, but you don't really need to nitpick over, you know, 1 or 2 absorption increases for armor. But that's just my personal opinion. We'll do an in-depth defense breakdown a little later. But guys, let me know what you think. Let's get into some PvP matches because, I mean, talk is talk, but let's see how the weapon performs, right? Alright guys, so here we go with the actual PvP matches. And starting off, I was having a bit of an armor crisis and testing out a few rings. As you can see, I was using the Lloyd shield ring and stuff, just testing some stuff out just to see how effective it was. But you can see there, one combo from the Lothric Greatsword, and we did 862 damage in one hit. So we switch out our life ring to the Sun Princess ring, and this guy ended up switching his weapon, so we gave him some chance to buff, but it doesn't really matter. Now, something I didn't really discuss in the breakdown video was the effectiveness of the Lothric Greatsword's weapon art. Now, it is something that can be very dangerous to use, but again, using it the right way, just like that, when you can see an enemy attack starting up, especially if they're using a weapon that isn't always the fastest, you can, once you see the weapon start up, you can activate your stomp and bust out the R2 and catch your opponent just like that. And with heavy armor, like I mentioned earlier, when you have more poise, I've noticed that you don't get knocked out of the animation for the stomp as often as you would if you were using light armor. So right there, the guy did a jumping attack on me with a greatsword, which would normally hit you out of any attack you're doing, but my stomp was still able to go through, and I was able to uppercut him and punish that jumping attack to finish him off. With this guy, he was smart. He rolled away from the stomp. He didn't want to contest it, which is very intelligent. Whenever you see an enemy stomp, just get out of the way. When you see them charging the R2, get out of the way. Don't even be in the vicinity. You don't want to risk that. And right there, we punish him easy because we see him starting up his weapon art, and we had some decent range between us. Again, the Greatsword has so much range, does so much damage. You can easily punish mistakes with this weapon and also counter a lot of things, like I mentioned earlier with trades and whatnot. There you can see the long-reaching effect of the weapon. And here, see, the guy contested the stomp. He was unable to hit us out of it. I think we activated his Tears of Denial or something, but the stomp would have normally killed him. And then we just finished him off, chasing him down with the rolling R1. Very effective. This guy, also using an Ultra Greatsword, somehow was able to roll away from our attack, but nonetheless, it's not really going to make too much of a difference here. He's using the Shield of Wands so he can weapon art through the shield, I think. But again, we're just going to showcase the effectiveness of the Ultra Greatsword. You can see there, again, chasing down the roll because the weapon range is so good. You know, it is the best iteration of the Greatsword, as I mentioned. So again, we run up to the opponent, activate the stomp. If they end up backing away or, you know, doing something, we don't have to follow through with our L2. Our R2, because the stomp is the L2 and then R2 is the follow-up. So you don't have to end up following through with the R2 for the uppercut. You just use the stomp to kind of scare opponents. If they're starting up their attack or they want to try to attack through your stomp, then yeah, by all means, bust out that R2. If you see them rolling towards you, maybe trying to punish you for doing the stomp, which is really hard to do, you can delay the uppercut like you see right there. You can just delay it and just deal a ton of damage, punishing their roll or punishing their attack. So there's a lot of psychological component to using the stomp based on what you see your opponent doing. It gives you a lot of time to kind of see your opponent. The stomp lasts for about 1 to 1.5 seconds. And here you can see the effectiveness the first time of us using the whip to finish off the opponent, cutting right through the Havel Great Shield and finishing him off with the final blow. Now, this match that you're seeing right here, you know, people love to use the shield and straight sword combination, and this guy does some decent damage on us. Look at this, just spamming R1. Hit us about 5 times. We're less than half health. Hits us with a firebomb as we back up. But again, one combo. Look at that, 1,042 damage. We're almost tied on health. He has a little bit more than me. Deal 72 through his shield right there. We just need one real solid connect to finish him off here. So you're gonna see that no matter what, these swords, they can get back into the swing of things no matter how bad you start off the PvP match, because all it takes is one combo to finish the opponent off. And I switched to the whip here and I made another mistake. I didn't two-hand it and I ended up parrying with L2 by mistake. But again, we catch his roll. If we didn't make that mistake at the, when we switched to the whip, we probably would have finished him off instead of him shooting us with the crossbow there. But it is what it is, and we ended up finishing off anyways. So that was a close match. We almost lost that one, but we still came out on top. Now this is the match that I was talking about earlier with the Exile Greatsword. I was using the Ultra Greatsword when I had my Faith build set up, and I was using the deep protection and stuff, and that's where I noticed that I was able to get cut down because I had lighter armor. When I respec the character and put on heavier armor with the Halo Ring, I noticed that when I stomp, enemies don't hit me out of my special attack nearly as often, the special attack being the stomp. And you're going to see that in just a moment here. So there you can see, he ended up hitting me with both the R1, I think, and the L2 R2 with the Exile Greatsword. And my stomp went through both the R1 and the L2 and came out with the uppercut while he was doing his follow-up R2. It did a lot of damage to me, but we did even more damage to him. We essentially killed him and activated his Tears of Denial. He ended up chasing us down a little bit with the katana, but we ended up fishing out the whip attack for the win still. We just made a little bit of a mistake, mistiming, because he was using a washing pole, has a lot of range. And like I said, it's another good weapon to use to finish off opponents, but you just have to be mindful because you can parry the running attacks from the katanas. They're fairly easy to parry usually. Any running attack is usually easy to parry. This guy, kind of funny. I wouldn't have normally included a clip like this, but I had to include it, give this guy props. He's using a worker's build, and it was surprisingly effective. This guy was actually really good. He knew how to space properly. As you can see here, it was hard to catch him. But again, like I said, only one or two hits and you're back in the swing of things. Look at this. You don't want to end up trading with an ultra great sword. So anytime opponents try to take risks like that, you're going to usually come out on top. So now that we have him down to his last sliver of health, we're going to switch to the whip. And you're going to see one of the points I made during the first part of the video where I was breaking things down, that you don't actually want to be close to the whip, because when you are, if I start up the special attack, you're going to be staggered and you're going to get a 3-hit combo in. Look at this. So I see him rushing me down and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to space him out and then I'm going to approach him and do the special attack. So you can see how I approach him and the special attack combos him and does 172 damage to finish him off. So very, very effective weapon to finish off opponents with. So I really recommend you guys try the whip. Also, it's unparryable, right? So it's awesome. There you can see another one-hit combo doing 1,044 damage. This guy, one hit and he's dead. And he can't parry my attacks, right? He's trying to parry. He ran up to me, parried, missed it, obviously, because you can't parry the R1, and he ended up taking a ton of damage. So enemies that try to parry you with an ultra great sword, pray for them, because yeah, it's not going to happen. So this is why I love this sword. I mean, I know that I've mentioned before that I really, really don't like parries in this game, and it's not that I have anything against people who parry. Well, actually I kind of do. I don't like people who like to spam parries, and you know, I fought people where I'm using like lighter weapons, and they'll just parry, and maybe on the 5th parry they'll finally get one, and it's just really annoying. I think the parries in this game just do too much damage with the Hornet Ring and everything. It's really annoying, but I mean, we'll see. I mean, it is part of the game, but when you have weapons that can't be parried, you don't have to worry about it, right? And I personally don't think parrying for the most part takes that much skill. I mean, it's easy to spam out parries and catch people. But don't get me wrong, there are some people that I face up against, and when they parry me, and if you guys watch my live stream for PvPs, you know I respect a good parry. So don't get me wrong, but it's the people who like to spam them out I'm not really a big fan of, but it's in the game, so you have to deal with it. Here you can see we're going up against a Goddard Twin Sword with Dark Moon Blade. So this guy is really trying to bust out, you know, quote unquote, the top tier meta. But I mean, you know, I got an ultra great sword, so I'm not too worried. As you can see, he hit us once. We switched out the life ring to the Sun Princess ring. We're basically back at full health. He tried to come back in, roll back in to do the rolling R1 on us with the Goddard Twin Swords when we were still in the stomp animation. But again, you have time to delay that stomp animation and come out with your uppercut still. And we did when he came back into us, and we ended up killing him in like, what was that, 2 or 3 hits? absolutely insane. And the uppercut, not to mention, it does a ton of damage, if you guys didn't notice that in the first place. Here is actually one of the matches I think that this sword would struggle with, the Lothric Knight Ultra Great Sword. It is, or it's called the Lothric Great Sword. I don't know why I keep calling it the Lothric Knight Ultra Great Sword, but whatever. The Fume Sword, it does have more reach, and I mean, it does a little bit less damage, the Fume Ultra Great Sword, but that thrusting attack has a lot more range than normal attacks do. So we did get a little bit lucky, because that is one of the matchups where we might want to switch weapons out. The Fume Ultra Great Sword is one of the ones where we would struggle with this weapon, but that's pretty much the only bad matchup I can really think of. But that pretty much wraps up the video, guys. We're coming to an end here. Let me know what you think about the weapons and the series in general. If you want to see more weapons, please let me know. But like and subscribe. Check out the other videos for more Dark Souls content. Thanks for watching, guys. Quantum is out.